Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that affects every single one of us at some point in our lives. The paralyzing fear of failure and how we can overcome it with courage. Before we get started, I want to talk directly to those of you who might be hovering over that skip button right now. I get it, we're all busy, and sometimes we just want the quick takeaways. But what I'm about to share with you isn't just motivational fluff. These are time-tested principles from ancient philosophy that have guided some of history's greatest minds through their darkest moments. If you're struggling with fear right now, or if you've ever let an opportunity pass you by because you were afraid to try, I promise that the next few minutes could genuinely change how you approach challenges for the rest of your life. So stay with me. Your future self might thank you for it. Let me start with a question. What was your biggest regret from the past year? Take a moment to think about it. For many of us, our deepest regrets aren't about the things we tried and failed at. They're about the things we never attempted at all. I still remember standing at the edge of a cliff at a quarry lake about 10 years ago. My friends had all jumped into the water below, but I stood frozen, calculating all the ways I could get hurt. After 20 minutes of internal debate, I climbed back down the path without jumping. It wasn't the fall I was afraid of. It was the possibility of failure, of looking foolish, of not being brave enough. A decade later, I don't think about the risk I avoided. I think about the experience I missed. This is the insidious nature of our fear of failure. It disguises itself as prudence, as careful consideration, as wisdom, but often it's simply fear wearing a mask of rationality, and it costs us dearly. The ancient Stoic philosophers had remarkable insights into this very human predicament. They developed a philosophy that didn't just acknowledge our fears, but provided practical tools to overcome them. Today, we're going to explore how their timeless wisdom can help us build the courage to face our fears and live more fulfilling lives. The Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Think about that for a moment. How much of your suffering comes not from actual failures, but from anticipated ones, from the terrible scenarios you play out in your mind that never actually materialize? When we fear failure, we're not really afraid of the event itself. We're afraid of the stories we tell ourselves about what that failure might mean, that we're not good enough, that we'll be judged, that we'll lose something important to us, that we won't recover. But the Stoics taught us to distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential Stoic teachers, put it this way: "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This distinction is crucial because it shifts our focus from outcomes, which are often beyond our control, to our actions and intentions, which we can control. We can't control whether our business venture succeeds in a changing market, but we can control the effort we put into it. We can't control whether someone accepts our love, but we can control how honestly and genuinely we express it. When we focus on what's within our control, the fear of failure begins to lose its grip on us. Because true failure isn't falling short of an outcome. It's falling short of our own character and values. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, reminded himself daily, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." What he meant is that the obstacles we face, including our fears, can become the very path to our growth. Our fear of failure isn't something to be eliminated. It's something to be engaged with, understood, and ultimately transformed into courage. But how do we practically begin this transformation? How do we move from understanding these principles intellectually to embodying them in our lives? First, we need to redefine our relationship with failure itself. The Stoics viewed preferred indifference, things like health, wealth, and reputation, as desirable but not essential to our happiness. What was essential was virtue, living with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. This perspective changes everything. If we see failure as a moral shortcoming, as something that diminishes our worth as human beings, then of course we'll fear it intensely. But if we see it as simply one outcome among many possible outcomes, as information rather than identity, then we can approach it with much more equanimity. Epictetus advises, "It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them." The failure itself isn't what causes our suffering. It's how we judge that failure, what meaning we assign to it. Consider Thomas Edison, who famously made thousands of unsuccessful attempts at creating a working light bulb. When asked about his failures, he reportedly said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This isn't just positive thinking, it's a fundamentally different relationship to the concept of failure. Edison saw his failures as valuable data points on the path to discovery. We can cultivate this perspective by practicing what the Stoics called premeditation of evils, or negative visualization. This isn't pessimism, it's pragmatic preparation. By contemplating potential failures in advance, we reduce their power to disturb us if they actually occur. Try this exercise. Think of something you're afraid to attempt. Now imagine the worst reasonable outcome, not catastrophic fantasy, but real possibilities. What would happen? How would you feel? What resources, internal and external, would you draw upon to cope? How might you rebuild or redirect your efforts? By walking through this process mentally, you're doing several powerful things. You're demystifying failure, you're building confidence in your resilience, and you're creating a contingency plan that makes action feel safer. Seneca practiced this regularly. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, he inoculated himself against the fear of it. Another practical approach is to start small. Courage, like any virtue, must be practiced. You don't begin by conquering your greatest fear. You start with smaller challenges that stretch your comfort zone gradually. I remember when I first started my channel, the thought of putting myself out there for potential criticism terrified me. So I started by recording videos without publishing them. Then I shared them with just a few trusted friends. Then I published a few under a pseudonym. Each step built my courage muscle until finally, I was ready to fully put myself out there. The Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus taught that habits must be formed by repeated actions. Courage isn't something we're born with or without. It's something we develop through consistent practice, through repeatedly doing the things that scare us until they no longer do. This brings us to another key Stoic principle, the focus on process over outcomes. When we're fixated on results, on success or failure, we place our peace of mind at the mercy of things often beyond our control. But when we focus on the process, on showing up, on doing our best work, on living according to our values, we reclaim our agency. Marcus Aurelius guided himself with this principle. Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you, with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice, and on freeing yourself from all other distractions. This presence, this immersion in the process, is not just philosophically sound, it's practically effective. When we're fully engaged in the task at hand, we have less mental bandwidth for fear. Our attention is on our actions, not our anxieties. About potential outcomes. Think about any skill you've mastered or challenge you've overcome. Wasn't it precisely when you stopped overthinking and simply engaged fully with the process that you made your greatest progress? Now, I want to address something important here. Some of you might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but my fear isn't irrational. It's based on past experiences. I've failed before, and it was painful. This is a valid concern, and the Stoics wouldn't dismiss it. They acknowledged that pain and setbacks are real parts of life. What they offered wasn't a way to avoid pain, but a way to relate to it differently. Epictetus, who had been a slave and experienced tremendous hardship, taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Our past failures don't define our future unless we let them. They can be our greatest teachers if we approach them with the right mindset. When we fail, we have a choice. We can let that failure define us, or we can use it as a stepping stone. We can see it as evidence of our inadequacy or as valuable feedback that helps us grow. I've had videos that bombed, projects that collapsed, and relationships that ended painfully. Each one taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. The failures that hurt the most contained the lessons I needed most urgently. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, insofar as it stands ready against the accidental and the unforeseen and is not apt to fall." Life throws us unexpected challenges, and our ability to meet them with courage and adaptability is what defines our character. This brings us to another powerful Stoic practice, the evening review. At the end of each day, Marcus Aurelius would reflect on what he had done well and where he had fallen short. This wasn't self-flagellation, but honest assessment aimed at growth. Try this practice yourself. Each evening, ask, where did I act with courage today? Where did I give in to fear? What can I learn from both? This simple ritual builds self-awareness and integrity, which are essential foundations for courage. The Stoics also emphasize the importance of community and role models. Seneca wrote extensively to his friend Lucilius, offering guidance and support. He advised, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. Who are the courageous people in your life? Who inspires you with their willingness to try, to fail, to learn, and to try again? Surround yourself with these people. Learn from them. And just as importantly, be this person for others. I've been fortunate to have mentors who showed me what courage looks like in action. One friend in particular stands out. Despite facing rejection after rejection for her creative work, she never stopped creating, never stopped submitting, never stopped believing in her vision. Her persistence wasn't blind optimism. It was rooted in a deep commitment to her craft and a willingness to grow through feedback. She now has a successful career doing what she loves, not because she never failed, but because she never let failure stop her. Another key aspect of Stoic courage is the long view. The Stoics practiced cosmic consciousness, the awareness that our lives are brief moments in the vast expanse of time, and that generations before us have faced similar fears and challenges. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Soon you will have forgotten all things, and soon all things will have forgotten you." This isn't meant to be depressing, but liberating. When we zoom out and see our lives in this broader context, our fears often shrink accordingly. Ask yourself, 100 years from now, will this potential failure matter? Will anyone remember it? Probably not, but they might remember what you created, who you helped, or how you changed something for the better because you had the courage to try. The Stoics also taught that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. It's normal and natural to feel afraid when facing the unknown or when something important is at stake. Courage doesn't mean eliminating these feelings. It means not being ruled by them. Seneca expressed this beautifully. Sometimes, even to live, is an act of courage. There are days when simply showing up, when taking the next step despite your fear, is the most courageous thing you can do. I've had moments in my life where anxiety was so overwhelming that just getting out of bed felt like an act of bravery. If you're in that place right now, please know that I see you. Your courage in those moments is no less real. In fact, it may be more profound than the courage of someone taking a more visible risk. As we begin to wrap up, I want to return to where we started, with regret. The Stoics taught that a life well lived is one where, at the end, we can look back without regret, knowing we lived according to our values. There's a modern version of this ancient wisdom called the regret minimization framework. It's simple. When facing a decision, project yourself into the future and ask which choice you're more likely to regret not taking. Often, the path of courage becomes clearer when viewed through this lens. I found this to be transformative. In my own life, when I left my stable corporate job to pursue my passion, I was terrified. But when I imagined myself at 80, looking back on my life, I knew I would regret not trying far more than I would regret trying and failing. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." We can't control all outcomes, but we can control our choices, our efforts, our character, and ultimately, that's what courage is about. Not guaranteeing success, but guaranteeing that we'll live according to our deepest values, regardless of the outcome. So, where do we go from here? How do we begin to cultivate this Stoic courage in our daily lives? Start small. Identify one area where fear has been holding you back. Apply the principles we've discussed. Distinguish what you can control from what you can't. Practice negative visualization. Focus on process over outcomes. Learn from past failures. Surround yourself with courageous people. Take the long view and accept that fear is normal, but doesn't have to be in charge. Then take one small step, just one. You don't have to conquer your greatest fear tomorrow. You just have to move toward it rather than away from it. Remember what Seneca taught. It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that. Things are difficult. Often the anticipation of facing our fears is worse than actually facing them. As you continue this journey, be gentle with yourself. The Stoics valued justice and temperance alongside courage. They understood that true strength includes kindness, including kindness to ourselves when we struggle. I believe in you. I believe that you have within you all the courage you need to face your fears and live a life of meaning and purpose. The Stoics would say that this courage isn't something you need to acquire. It's something you need to uncover, to remember, to return to. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look. Look within, find that source of strength, and then step forward with courage, knowing that what matters most is not whether you succeed or fail by external standards, but whether you honor your own character and values in the attempt." If you found value in this exploration of Stoic courage, please consider sharing this video with someone who might benefit from it. And I'd love to hear in the comments about a time when you faced your fear of failure and what you learned from the experience. Until next time, remember the words of Seneca. Sometimes even to live is an act of courage. Your courage matters. It ripples out into the world in ways you may never fully know. Keep going, keep trying, keep growing. Thank you for staying with me on this journey. I'll see you in the next video.